What's going on, HCL fans? It's Gordon Sine here, coach of the New Jersey Giratinas, and today I am joined by PokeRangerMike.
Hey guys, how's it going?
And we are here to bring you the power rankings after week 2.
Bum bum bum.
So to start off, at number 12, Mike and I both have the Pittsburgh Aerodactyls, coached by GolemGaming. And the reason I have Golem down here is for the fact that in the 2 weeks that he played, he brought very similar teams. He made one switch of Pokemon, like from this week from the previous week. On top of that, his sets didn't really vary either, so it makes him more predictable. And on top of that, he just put in a transaction dropping Mega Aerodactyl to get Mega Metacham, but he already has Gallade, so it's the same exact typings, and I don't really see how that helps his team.
Yeah, in terms of his battle this week, as Gordon said, he was playing predictably, which is a challenge. Hopefully, as it goes forward, he learns to kind of mix it up and change some things. One of the interesting things is the new Pokemon that he did bring this week was Shuckle, which the issue with Shuckle is that it ends up being setup fodder a lot of time, and that's exactly what happened this week. So you always got to be careful of having those Pokemon which don't have too much offensive threat and just allow your opponent to set up on you and sweep.
Exactly. Usually Pokemon like Shuckle or My Fortress work better early game to set up like hazards and things like that, rather than bringing it in late game, because late game your opponent is looking to finally have that opportunity to bring out the mon that counters the rest of your team. So bringing out something like Shuckle late game was probably not the best thing for Golem.
Yeah. So hopefully in the future he will decide to mix up his kind of prep and his playstyle, so that way he's not as predictable. And hopefully he might switch up some of his members, that way it's a little bit more, put together, and also he can use some of the points that he has left to use.
Exactly. So moving on to our number 11, we both have the Columbus Cubchoo, coached by UrsaSupreme.
Yep, and so I put Ursa here. Pretty much it was the same from last week. His battle was very challenging. He was up against Collin, who both Gordon and I do have ranked pretty high up there now. And I feel like he played fairly well for the most part. I feel like if he made a couple different choices, then he might have been able to do a lot better. One of the issues was when he protected with his Tentacruel against the Lucario. Had he even attacked or done something different there, it might have been a different situation. But allowing him to nasty plot kind of just end up running through his team and doing a lot of damage. But I think Ursa would be able to do a lot of stuff moving forward once he gets a little bit more comfortable with
Exactly, and that's why I moved Ursa up and moved Golem down, was because I think Ursa learned a lot in week 1, or in his week 1, his debut, but in week 2, and so I think he learned a lot with his team. I think he also learned a lot about just relying more on doing some calcs and things mid-battle. And I think he's getting a better feel for his team. I think with just learning everything he did this week, it just shows that he has more room for improvement versus Golem, who didn't really change much from week 1, and so I didn't see much improvement from him, and that's why I moved Ursa up over him.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to, once again, number 10, who we keep putting in the same place no matter what week it is.
Oh man, it is CogSentient in the Los Angeles Haunters, and look, Cog, we know you had to battle me and Mike, two of the top teams in the league right now, so I understand it's not been easy for you. However, there have been some very questionable plays on your part. When we're looking at Cog, in his match against me this week, he ended up using laser focus, but then signal beamed a Sylveon, and that ended up doing like no damage. And that play alone really changed up the match, because if he hydro pumped there, he could have killed off Sylveon, and then I wouldn't have had much to counter the Kingdra. Like he had momentum, because he did have signal beam for Abomasnow, which was good prep on his part. So if he killed Sylveon with Hydro Pump there, there's a chance he could have won that game.
Yeah. Like, I feel like in week 1, Cog, for the most part, didn't make a lot of misplays. I felt like that's kind of what happens in this battle against you. I felt like he over-predicted on a lot of stuff, and that really cost him. I think he needs to kind of just focus on what's in front of him and not try to do too many mind games, especially in the beginning. If you're trying to get back into the game, then that's important. But at the beginning, like you're saying with the Kingdra against the Sylveon, just go for the Hydro Pump. Don't predict the Mega Abomasnow to come in. So that's just my opinion.
And at the end of the day, like, even a laser focus Hydro Pump on Mega Abomasnow alone, it was gonna do chip, and there was like really no reason not to do it. Like, Jellicent was dead at that point. The worst thing that was gonna happen was it doesn't do much and you're forced to switch out, but it's still gonna do chip damage, and that's helpful. And so when you're in that state of the game, probably getting off the chip damage rather than taking that big of a risk on something that can hit you with the super effective move is probably your best play.
Yeah. So I hope the best for Cog. I think he does have the potential to do well. I think he just needs to get a little more comfortable with team building and just kind of play with what's in front of him, not with what could happen.
Exactly. So moving on to our number 9, we both have Rozzy and his Denver Avaluggs. And the reason I moved Rozzy up from last week was he showed a lot of improvement. Week 1, he obviously got unlucky with the red card switch, and also he did not prep at all for Kartana, and because of that he ended up losing. But this week he really prepped well for Golem's team. He really looked into what Golem had and looked into what he could do to counter it, like bringing Mach Punch on Infernape in order to counter Barbaracle in case it got knocked down to its Sash, which it did. So it was very good prep on Rozzy's part. Rozzy showed a lot of improvement, and I think he could be a top team, like we said, after the draft, if he continues to show this improvement.
Yep. Like I said last week, the only reason why I had him down at number 12 was just to kind of do like a little wake-up slap, and I definitely think he did that in spades. His team was very well put together. I like that he was a bit more balanced, and he kind of brought some of the threats which he didn't bring week 1, which he should have. And I think that really showed off just how strong this team can be. So I really look forward to seeing what he does in the future and where he'll go.
Exactly. So moving on to number 8, we have EpicMic's Boston Bronzongs. And now I put Mick up at number 4 last week. Basically because I was mad at myself for a stupid play I made. If I really was thinking about it, number 5 probably would have made a little more sense, but I had to punish myself last week, so that's why. But anyway, I moved Mick down to number 8 just because this week he ended up playing you, Mike, and he did not seem to really have a plan for your team. He made quite a few misplays. Letting Metagross go down so early was not good for his team because he didn't really have much else to help against your team. Metagross was like one of the things he had to preserve. On top of that, he made some questionable switches like with Dragalge and things like that. So for that reason, I have Mick down at number 8.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that Mick had, honestly, though, was just kind of a matchup disadvantage. And one of the things that he did have was a pretty big ground weakness, which I was fully planning on exploiting. he made a couple of misplays, but overall, I was kind of controlling the battle, which, is kind of hard for him to come back from that. Um, it's tough because I knew he was going to be leading off with the Sand Sledge. I knew he's going to be going for Stealth Rocks. So it was really easy for me, like in that battle, to just click Liquidation with my Arachnid, do some massive damage, and just start chipping away at his team. That way, in the back, I could, bring out my sweepers and just clean up afterward.
Yeah, definitely. Mick played a little too predictable in the beginning there, I think, and I think if he can switch things up a little bit, catch his opponents off guard a little more, he'll be back up where he was last week.
Yeah, we'll definitely see. Last week I didn't have him as high as you, and one of the reasons was kind of his luck that got him that 6-0 sweep. But I do think Mick can put together some good strategies and, really be a contender. But we'll just have to see what he's able to do in the coming
Exactly,
weeks.
and hopefully he does not win this week because I'm playing him and I'd rather win. But but besides the point,
And now it's number 7.
Yeah, exactly. And number 7, I have the Boston Delphox, and so do you. And the reason I moved Red down this spot was because even though he played a very close game against Gaytor, it just seemed like Gaytor was able to play the mind games at the end to claw his way back into winning the game, which was crazy because I remember I was in call with Valor and Cog, and we all thought at one point, oh, well, Red's got this now, and Gaytor caught everyone by surprise, and so Red's still a big threat in this league. I just think there are a few things he needs to work on in order to make it into the top half, because right now the top half is looking quite strong, and I think Red is just one step away.
Yeah. Honestly, the battle between Red and Gaytor was probably my favorite battle of the week. It wasn't necessarily as close as Fish and Valordin, but I definitely think it was the most interesting battle this week. One thing it was so much back and forth, which was what I really loved about the battle. And I really think that Red did a good job. I think it's just that in the mid game, he kind of started to lose control, and he went from a bit more offense to a bit more passive playing, which allowed Gaytor to come back and kind of rip through parts of his team, which was able to keep Red, in there before.
Yeah, totally. I feel the same exact way, but again, Red showed a lot of success in the first week, so Red, prove me wrong again for having you lower than you think you should be, and work your way back up, because that's what you did for week 1, so I know you can do it. Oh boy. So moving on to my number 6 and your number 5, I have Gaytor and the Cincinnati Salandits, and the reason I have him at number 6 is because he played a great match against Valor, however, in week 1, however, he did lose that 3-0, and then this week, like you said, he played a great match against Red and found a way to win, even though he looked like he was in a losing position, and I see that you have him over Valor, and the only reason I don't have Valor as low as you do is mostly because he did beat Gaytor, so I feel like out of all the remaining 6 teams, Gaytor just hasn't beaten a top contender yet.
Yeah, the reason why I have Valor so low, which we'll talk about once you get to him on your list, is once again kind of like a wake-up slap, like I did when I ranked Rozzy last week. But going back to Gaytor, I think he did a great job. Had some nice prep, and he really played well. And the big thing, the reason why I have number 5 and 4 where there are, is because their play this week impressed me. I was impressed by how they played this week. And so that's why I'm having Gaytor as number 5.
Yeah, he definitely was a big shock for everyone after week 1. And then this week, with him having a limit time to really prep and having to get ready on his phone because he didn't have access to his computer, and still being able to pull off a win under all that pressure was quite impressive.
Very true.
Moving on to my number 5 and your number 4 pick, we have Collin and the Valencia Venusaurs. And the reason I have Collin at number 5 and not in the top 4 is because I still haven't seen him beat a top contender. Like, he beat Ursa, who we have ranked very low, but he ended up losing 3-0 to Fish. So because of that, I don't see him as a top 4 team yet. But he did play really well, and he played well against Ursa, made great predictions with the Protect for Tentacruel and being able to set up that nasty plot. Also, that Celesteela was able to basically wall all of Ursa's team for a long time in that game. So Collin has shown a lot of improvement from last week. But again, I need to see him battle and stay at the level of one of the top contenders before I can move him up any higher.
I still think he did a very good job. And like I said before, I didn't really know what his battling style was before this league. And I think overall it is very solid. You say he didn't necessarily perform well against a top team, but still bringing Fish down to a 3-0 where Valor, brought him down to a 1-0 is still pretty close. So I still think he deserves quite a bit of credit for that. And I think overall he played well this week. He prepped well, and he's going to be a tough opponent in the future.
Yeah. So your number 6 and my number 4. We both have Valor and the Dallas Darmanitans at those positions. And so why Valor at number 6 for you?
So, like I said, when I talked about Gaytor and Collin, I said I was impressed by their play this week. On the other hand, I was kind of unimpressed by Valor, just because, we keep holding him up to this kind of standard of having this league experience and supposed to do well. And because of that, it can kind of create pressure and make someone not do quite as well. One of the issues that he had this week was many times throughout the battle, in my opinion, he threw away his chance of winning it. And that's where I was very unimpressed, because he did have the opportunity for victory, but he just didn't take it. And so that's why I put him a bit lower. Like I said, it's more of a wake-up slap than anything. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in the future to remedy this.
Yeah, and I have him at number 4 because he played 2 of our top 6 teams, being Fish and Gaytor. So he had 2 pretty tough opponents, and he held his own pretty much against Fish. Like you said, he did have a win con multiple times in that game and ended up letting that slip away from him. However, he still brought Fish down to a 1-0, and because of that, playing such a tight game against one of the top contenders, I can't really find a reason to move him down much lower besides the fact that he misplayed.
Yeah.
So moving on up to number 3, Mike and I both have my team, New Jersey Giratinas, and the reason I have myself at number 3 is because I am one of the few teams at 2-0. I've won both my games. I have a 7 in differential, so I haven't really let somebody bring my team down, and I have been preserving, this week at least, I tried to preserve the differential, unlike week 1 when I let Landorus die, but this week I changed that. I know Mike's in my division. I know I have to try and get as many points in my differential as I possibly can, and so that's why at the end there I was switching so much against Cog, because I want to preserve that. I think I played a pretty good game against both Cog and Golem, and that I prepped well for the 2. And I think my team, again, is just one of the better drafted teams, has a little bit better synergy than some of the other teams. So I put myself at number 3. The reason I'm not at 1 or 2, even though I'm at 2-0, is because I didn't play the any of the tougher opponents yet. I've played 2 of the weaker opponents, so I don't see myself going above number 3 just yet. But again, I'm 2-0, and I played pretty well in both those games, so it's hard to deny that I would be at least a top 4, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Like I also have you at number 3. I definitely think you have played very well the last 2 weeks. You have a very good team and you're able to build pretty well and play very well. So I'm very excited to see, as my division rival, how it's going to go into the semifinals.
Yeah, definitely. So, since we're talking about ourselves, we'll go on to your team, Mike. And the reason I have you at number 2 and not at number 1, even though you did win again this week, it was more because I was impressed by Fish, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But, again, you've definitely been playing really well. You have 2 wins. But again, more the weaker opponent argument, kind of like myself. You ended up playing Cog and Mick, and those 2 both against you played well, but didn't really have anything to counter your team. Like you said earlier, Mick didn't really have much to answer your team. You kind of had an advantage on him. I felt the same way with Cog. So because of that, just because of the difficulty of your matches compared to Fish, I feel like you're at number 2 versus Fish who's at number 1.
Yeah, I just kind of felt like mixing up and putting myself up 1. Really, I feel like at the moment, Fish and I are going to be kind of battling it out for the number 1 and 2 spot, which, kind of reflects it in this power ranking. I feel like had my Don fan gotten the high roll on the Mega Absol and knocked it out, then I may have been put up on number 1 on your list because that would have made it a 5-0 victory in my favor. But who knows?
Yeah, and so Fish, he earned his spot at number 1 for me this week. Again, he's had probably one of the more difficult schedules out of the top 3 teams. And he had to play both Valor and Collin, who we both have in the top 6. And so having to play 2 top teams with 2 guys with league experience, it's pretty tough. And being able to win both those matches, especially when Muck got frozen and Fish was put in a position where he actually could have lost. I get that Valor kind of choked it away, but he was still able to play the mind games to the point where he got Valor in a mind state where he didn't make the right play. And by being able to do that and beating Valor and beating Collin in week 1, I think he's proven himself. He's beaten really tough opponents, and I think he's right now the strongest team just based on who he's played.
Yeah. Fish did a great job in this game. Obviously the freeze made it a very different game after that point. Had Valor abused the freeze a little bit more than he did, or had it never happened, it would have been very different overall. But I think Fish did a good job considering that. I'm glad that he didn't go on tilt after that and, messed everything up for himself. He had the set of Keldeo at the very end, which allowed him to win. And, just great job to him.
Definitely. Great job by Fish this week. He played a great game, and I think he's a top contender. And I am terrified. I really do not want to play Fish right now. But yeah, that's it for our week 2 power rankings. We will be back after the week 3 matches to talk about where we think all the teams are at. Until next week, I've been Gordon Sine.
And it's been PokeRangerMike.
We will see you next week.